feel like in the minds of every Gen Z person, there's like a ticking time bomb in the back of your head thinking like we have 7 years before we start reaching critical tipping points.
What do we want?
Climate justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
We can go into the streets and yell at elected officials, but we have to call out the system underneath which they are operating in. If they don't do something, then my generation will be at the forefront of facing the negative impacts of it. My name is Jerome Foster II. I am a member of the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, and I'm the co-founder and co-executive director of Wake Up. As a kid, I was very much interested in astrophysics, in that world of looking out into what is the possibility of the future. And I, through that, looked at my own planet. I was wondering what's happening on Earth, and I realized that there's so much happening right now that we have to fix before we can start just focusing on how we branch out and work on future problems, but how do we make sure that the world that we live in now is sustainable within the planet that we live on. I think within my journey, I never expected to be working directly in a position of policy making, because historically young people aren't welcome into spaces like this. The DC Council was having a kind of testimony period, and for 7 hours I went down to the building and I waited and watched fossil fuel lobbyists lobby against clean energy, and this bill would have been the most progressive decarbonization bill in the nation at the time. And from that experience of testifying, I was able to impact half of the DC Council members to agree with the legislation, because a community member that was not from a corporation or a company that had profits as their main motive, but a young person who was just fighting for their future, was something that changed their hearts. And unanimously, 100% of the council was able to pass that bill. And I saw how policy can change lives, because that is now seeing Washington, D.C. being one of the most sustainable cities in the country and in the world, really. That just shows that, like, just by one person standing up and making their voices heard can touch the hearts of powerful people that should have morality as their number one priority and not profits.
Today, we will be marching from the White House to the Supreme Court.
I started an organization called 1 Million of Us, which had the goal of mobilizing 1 million young people to register and turn out to vote. And from that, I was able to, in the years leading up to 2020, mobilize a whole movement of young people to go out in the streets from all across the country to really show that young people had a position at the table and needed to be heard. And right after the election, they reached out and asked if I would be a part of the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. Hey, how you doing? Good to see you. Basically, within this position, we oversee all the federal agencies, and we review all the programs in which there are environmental justice. And we think about, how do we make sure our communities are represented? As the first and only Gen Z person in this role, there's so much weight and there's so much riding on this opportunity for us to work on environmental justice issues and get these policies passed, because there are communities in Kern County, California, and South Shore, Chicago, and in Cancer Alley in Louisiana that are like really facing these issues. And these policies can change lives. The climate crisis is intersectional at its basis point. It impacts communities like LGBTQ people, because when they have natural disasters, they're oftentimes shut out of shelter points. And if we think about people that are oftentimes most vulnerable to climate change, it's people who are unhoused and are homeless. And 40% of the homeless population in the United States is LGBTQ people. And thinking about how it intersects with environmental racism, where 71% of coal-fired power plants are placed in Black and brown communities. Like, all these intersections talk about how every slow-rolling crisis that we have right now is being sped up by the climate crisis, and it's lighting a fuel on injustices that need to be fixed in order for us to progress as a human species.
It was definitely good to come together.
What motivates me is engaging with young people every day. There's hundreds of young people that are around the world that send me messages, and I communicate with to deeply understand what this crisis looks like on the ground level. And I think what motivates me is seeing that everyone around the world is rising up alongside me. We're truly in an uprising moment in which we are using every ounce of power that we have to change the system. And I think that's what motivates me, is seeing all of us coming together and understanding what real change looks like is about us being united and using that to change the world. I think when you define a change maker, it is a person that identifies within our society a glaring problem. And I think a change maker is a person that understands that and says, I'm actually a part of a collective. I'm a part of a community that built this world around me, and we have to advocate for it to be changed at the root level. That's what the mind of a change maker is. I think my future is just to help where I can and to support where I need to be and to be a part of the movement that's around me and what we're spearheading as our generation. Because without us, what are we gonna do? Without us rising up as journalists, as storytellers, as activists, I think that is kind of our path, and just to continue doing that.